And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Our show today comes to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Tsimshian people. Like cows, moose have a four-chambered stomach. Moose are herbivores who survive primarily on bark, shrubs, and a variety of other plant life. In fact, to maintain their massive size, they eat about 73 pounds of food a day in the summer and then 34 pounds in the winter. On today's Open Connection, we open our archives to bring you this story from 1979.
Leroy the Moose is alive and well and living in Terrace. Well, actually, he's living out at Old Remo, where Ron and Betty Stewart have been looking after the hapless moose for about 6 months now. Discovered at around 2 or 3 weeks of age, Leroy was apparently the weaker of two twins and was shunned by his mother. So Conservation Officer Dave Crack asked the Stewarts to act as surrogate parents, especially since they had the surroundings and the facilities for him. So Leroy has adjusted well to his new life. He lives on goat's milk, grains, and grasses, has free run of the Stewart property as well. For protection, the Stewarts presented Leroy with a bright pink muzzle harness, hopefully discouraging hunters from shooting the tame animal. Leroy is quite used to people. He's a little shy of strangers yet, but Betty Stewart says he seems to be getting tamer all the time, and that's going to be a problem when the time comes for Leroy to start life on his own.
At first I was thinking that, maybe we would take him out quite far into the wilderness and let him go in the spring and hope that he would become more wild. But he's getting so tame now that I'm thinking that it would never work that way. He would probably always, or never be quite as afraid of people as a wild moose would be.
Well, just how does a moose react? Well, how does Leroy react to you? Is it friendly like an ordinary pet, or is there any kind of a similarity between, say, a moose and a cow, or how would you describe it?
I think probably Leroy is a little more reserved than a cow would be. Like he's fine with us, although even with us, he's not quite as friendly, we'll say, as the goats. He's skitterish of cars. They come in the yard, he'll run. And when strangers come, he definitely knows that it's a stranger. He acts differently.
Mm-hmm. So then he may not be too badly off then when he finally does leave.
Well, I don't know. We still have about 4 months to, decide. Mm-hmm. So, we'll see then. It's sort of a difficult decision. I feel it's a responsibility when you take a wild animal.
Well, why did you do it in the first place?
Well, because we had the situation and he needed a home, and we have the milk and we have the property. We have beaver dams that, he spent all summer in and around.
Would you hesitate to do it again?
I don't know.
Do you think maybe that your family, particularly your children, if they learned anything from it?
Oh, yes. It's been a real good experience. I'm really glad that I did it. The only thing is, I think we've probably worried quite a bit about him. About some, like a bear or something, getting him. And also, we've worried since hunting season started. And it is a worry. That's what. But then if there was a baby moose and there wasn't anywhere else, for it to go, then we'd probably consider it.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. From big to small, famous to local, museums gives us a place to think, grow, learn, wonder, and feel. Few cultural institutions have remained as important as museums over the decades. They preserve and promote social interests as diverse and unique as the people who visit them. Let us return to the archives to discover more about a museum in Haida Gwaii.
The Queen Charlotte Islands Museum in Skidegate recently won one of 3 awards presented by Heritage Canada. The Community Service Awards are given in recognition of groups, individuals, and companies whose efforts have benefited their community.
At Skidegate on the Queen Charlotte Islands, there is a museum built into the rocks overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The museum is operated by Tricia Gessler, the only full-time curator, and she's working to preserve much of the old culture of the islands. Her dedication so far seems to have met with considerable success, with a recent national award recognizing the Queen Charlotte Islands Museum Society for its efforts, and with the showing of exhibits from elsewhere, most notably the Legacy exhibit, a show of contemporary Indian art from several different nations. The museum itself is very young. Not yet 4 years have passed since it was built, but the Museum Society has been around for much longer.
It began as a museum society years ago. The idea was even 20 years ago or more. And we just opened 3 years ago when finally the Museum Society got grants for actual construction. So we're still not finished putting permanent displays together and permanent exhibits, things of that nature.
Did it take that 20 years to collect displays?
To some extent, but mostly people were collecting information and photographs and setting aside some things they'd hoped one day would go into the museum.
Did it take you very long then to fill this up with various artifacts?
Not really. There's a sizable collection. What's taking time is building the cases to house them, because we start from scratch. We get to McMillan Blodell as donated logs, and we mill the lumber and do the whole case from the log to the finished product here.
Well, what kind of exhibits do you have here?
Permanent displays are, in the long run, going to be particularly totem poles, old totem poles, and there's a constant ongoing restoration project with those. You can see one behind us here. And Haida artifacts, and all of that makes about 60-65% of the collection. Then there's also the really unique natural history and the history collections from the islands that are smaller but fairly complete.
Do you get traveling exhibits very often?
We do, but this is the largest one that's here now that we've ever had. We usually get a small one, or we'll create an exhibit ourselves from material that we can get on loan. We aren't quite yet set up again because of display cases to handle large exhibits that we have to house ourselves in cases.
Do you plan on trying to get a higher profile? For example, Kassan. Just about everybody knows about Kassan. What about this museum?
Yes, we are going to try to do that. We've had a number of visitors from literally all over the world, and without particularly advertising, it's surprising the number of people and where they're coming from. But we will be trying to do more of that, especially once the permanent displays are complete.
How do they generally react to what you've got so far?
Most people are really impressed. I think they're so surprised to come to what they consider is a really remote area and find a museum like this. A lot of people will walk in and say, expect that this is a city museum, and how did it get here? And they're very surprised and very pleased with it.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. Bush flying refers to aviation in sparsely populated northern areas. Early bush pilots faced challenges of cold weather and vast distances between communities. Given the rarity of airships, their planes are often equipped with skis or floats so they can take off and land on water or snow. Let us return the archives with Max Neubacher.
The North Country. It's notorious for its wide expanse, its isolation, and its dangers to the lone traveler. In many areas, the only access is by small aircraft, and every year some of those small aircraft run into trouble. In a part of the province covered by forested, mountainous, and often uninhabited tracts of land, searching for downed aircraft is often difficult. Every aircraft is supposed to be equipped with an emergency locator device that kicks into operation at impact, but that's not always the case on both counts, making the search effort all the more difficult. An air search and rescue program keeps volunteers prepared for such emergencies, and it trains them to spot tiny bits of wreckage or signs of life from the air, a task much easier said than done. Paid for by the provincial government, training sessions are held for private pilots and spotters, all volunteers concerned about the safety of airborne travelers. Such a session was held at the Terrace-Kitimat Airport recently, with the assistance of the Provincial Emergency Program and the Canadian Armed Forces. 8 CAF men and their Buffalo aircraft, 9 private pilots, and 47 spotters took part in the 2-day exercise last June. The first day concentrated on lectures, briefings, films, search methods, and so on, then some flying. The second day was devoted mostly to flying, with a briefing and debriefing session. The idea of the exercise was to have pilots and spotters locate 3 simulated crash sites, 1 by tracking down the signals emitted from an ELT, 2 by using only their eyes to spot simulated debris. Zone Air Chief Max Neubacher was in charge of the whole operation, and he was pretty happy with the results. Of the 9 aircraft and 47 spotters involved, only 2 returned without finding the crash sites.
We got normally in ELT search, which is the initial procedure to locate an aircraft at higher altitude. Aircrafts will be sent out in higher altitude, look for an ELT signal or listen for an ELT signal, home in on it. And after this ELT signal has been pinpointed to a certain degree, we sent a search aircraft for a low-level search additionally to it. If the aircraft is capable of handling low-level flying, we just ask him to descend and have a closer look in the area.
The Canadian Armed Forces has its own air search and rescue squad. They joined the effort by giving words of advice and helpful information to the searchers. The CAF generally doesn't get too involved with local exercises such as this one, but there is a cooperation and an information exchange. Captain Wayne Cross explained the CAF role in the volunteer search and rescue program.
The Armed Forces has the overall responsibility for all search and rescue in Canada, and our training on this particular weekend is working with the Provincial Emergency Program. They're running an exercise in aircraft search and rescue, and what we do is we have some slide briefings on mountain flying, ELT operations, survival in the bush that we showed last night. We fly their spotters in the Buffalo for spotter training, and then today when they're running their light aircraft on the search, we're going to fly with a couple of them and help them with briefings and debriefings and just try to help them with their program.
How ready do you think the local search and rescue people are in the Northwest in case somebody did go down or have to be looked for?
I think they're quite good. Their pilots are all experienced. They've flown in the local area a lot. The spotters that they've had out are excellent people, skydivers and other pilots and so on who do a lot of flying, and I think they're quite good.
Are they a big help to you in fulfilling your mission?
They are, because we only have 6 aircraft at Comox to cover all of the Yukon and British Columbia. And when we've got a large search on, if we can get more airplanes out, the more the better. And especially the PEP people who are, they're qualified, they do training exercises, and it can save us a lot of work.
The simulated emergencies at the Terrace-Kitimat Airport only happen once or twice a year, but with the help of agencies such as the Provincial Emergency Program, the Canadian Armed Forces, the Zone Air Chief, the provincial government, and concerned private citizens, the northern airspace is becoming a safer place to travel.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
4-H planted roots in Canada in 1913, where it found its first home in Roland, Manitoba. The Department of Agriculture donated 1 dozen purebred poultry eggs, purebred potatoes, and seed to Manitoba youth for them to raise and grow over several months. In this final segment of Open Connection, we return to archives with Gerhard Walters.
When it comes to 4-H competition and involvement, this is it. The bottom line, auction time at the Fall Fair. This pretty well marks the end of the project. The awards have been awarded and now help to determine the price on the block and whether the efforts paid off in monetary terms. But 4-H is said to pay off in other, perhaps more important terms as well. And to look at that further, we'll go back to June of this year. Gerhard Walters operates the Kispiox Cattle Company. His eldest son, Richard, helps.
I wanted to learn more about how to judge animals, like how to pick your animals, like if you're going to start a herd, like what kind of animals to get, and how to show an animal, how to feed it to get the best results, and how to groom it and get them ready for show. And I've learned pretty well all that, how to judge and everything.
Has it been teaching you anything other than directly involved with the animals? Has it been teaching you anything about yourself and how to handle yourself?
Yeah, well, we have to do speeches and demonstrations, and you learn a lot doing that. You have to do research on a topic and talk in front of an audience and everything. And then with a demonstration, you have to show the audience how to do something with a partner. So you learn how to work with somebody else.
You begin to see that 4-H is more than just animal husbandry, combining some aspects of Toastmasters, bookkeeping, craft classes, and a bit of Dale Carnegie course. The 4-H organization gives its young members a lot more than instruction on how to raise beef, goats, horses, or poultry. It is a growing experience. In the case of Richard Walter and other livestock competitors, it is also a year-round experience. Richard's father helped him pick a likely-looking calf to begin with, and the rest was up to Richard.
In February, you feed them about 6 pounds of grain, and it doesn't matter really, oats or barley, and you feed them about a bale a day. And then about towards the spring show time in May or so, then you start feeding them a little bit regular, like 2 times a day, and a little bit more grain, not as much hay. And about now, then we start feeding them 3 times a day, so they're always full. And you feed them about 18 to 20 pounds of grain, and not quite as much hay. Somebody tells you what they feed there, so you try it, and if it doesn't work, then you try something else. You mark down what how much you feed them, and what you feed them, and you just keep track of it, and here and then at the end of the year, you total it all up.
And one of the things that you have to do is work with your animal. Grooming and showmanship are an important part of the 4-H competitions. Beginning weeks before fair time, you have to practice grooming the animal. Brushing, clipping, cleaning, working to visually enhance all of the strong points of your beef to make sure that it appears at its best when the critical eye of the judge is at work. For Richard, the final 2 weeks before the fair are also busy with preparing for transportation and camping out on the fairgrounds. Even after you've arrived there, the work must continue right up until showtime in the ring. The beef classes at this year's Bulkley Valley exhibition were among the largest in history, and the judges themselves commented that the quality was as good and better as they've ever seen. But for Richard, 5 years of involvement with 4-H has brought not only knowledge, but the confidence and composure that goes with that knowledge.
And you go into the ring and there's a judge there, and he's just marking you on how well you present the animal to him and what it looks like and how you act in the ring. Like you lead it around and he'll come and like you have it all brushed up, and he'll come and he mess it up, and you have to comb it up and keep it nice and clean and keep showing it to him. And sometimes he'll have sawdust and he'll rub it on your calf, and if you don't see it, then he'll know you're not on the ball there. And you learn.
And Richard Walters has learned, and learned well. Among a lot of fine animals shown this year, 2 of the finest entered the ring under his hand. This breeding heifer won Richard Reserve Champion honors and praise from the judge on the animal's qualities. The beef steer we've been following throughout this segment, 1,110 pounds prime in 15 months of careful rearing, weighed in just 5 pounds lighter than Sharon Reed's grand champion, and won Richard his 2nd Reserve Champion ribbon of the day. In addition, the young subject of our feature on 4-H was greatly surprised to be awarded the Keeper Trophy for Herdsman of the Year. All in all, a heck of a showing, and it couldn't happen to a nicer kid.
Well, I didn't think I'd do this good. There's quite a few steers up in the other clubs. I thought I wouldn't get this good. Same with my heifer. I didn't think she was tall enough.
Our thanks to Graham Johnstone and the Fall Fair people in Smithers, and to some fine folks, the Walters family, and especially to Richard for letting us record this piece.
To be treated fairly and honorably. That's all we're asking. And it appears, unfortunately, that due to the fact that there's a disagreement on a cost-sharing formula, we may suspend negotiations for a while, but definitely not breaking off negotiations yet.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind and heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.